Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we are continuing in The Well at the World's End, a tale by William Morris. We are up to Chapter 16, and this is entitled, Ralph Rideth the Wood Perilous Again. And with that said, I'll get started. Now Roger led up to Ralph a strong horse, red roan of hue, duly harnessed for war, and he himself had a good grey horse, and they mounted at once. And Ralph rode slowly away through the wood at his horse's will, for he was pondering all that had befallen him, and wondering what next should hap. Meanwhile those others had not loitered, but were a horseback at once, and went their ways from Ralph through the wildwood. Not spake Ralph for a while, till Roger came close up to him and said, Whither shall we betake us, fair lord? Hast thou an inkling of the road whereon lies thine errand? Now to Ralph this seemed but mockery, and he answered sharply, I wot not thou wilt lead whither thou wilt, even as thou hast trained me hitherward with lies and a forged tale. I suppose thou wilt lead me by some roundabout road to the stronghold of the Dry Tree. It matters little, since thou durst not lead me back to the Burg. Yet now I come to think of it, it is evil to be alone with the found-out traitor and liar, and I had belike have done better to go with their company. Nay, nay, quoth Roger, thou art angry, and I marvel not thereat. But let thy wrath run off thee, if thou mayest, for indeed what I have told thee of myself and my griefs is not all mere lying. Neither was it any lie that thou wert in peril of thy life amongst those tyrants of the Burg. Thou with thy manly bearing and free tongue and bred, as I judge, to hate cruel deeds and injustice. Such freedom they cannot away with in that fellowship of hard men-at-arms, and soon hadst thou come to harm amongst them. And further, let alone that it is not ill to be sundered from yonder company, who mayhap will have rough work to do or ever they win home. I have naught to do to bring thee to Hampton-under-Scar, if thou hast no will to go thither. Though certes I would lead thee some whither, whereof thou shalt ask me not as now. Yet will I say thereof this much, that there thou shalt be both safe and well at ease. Now lastly know this, that whatever I have done it to do thee good, and not ill. And there is also another one, whom I will not name to thee, who wisheth thee better yet, by the token of those 2 strokes stricken by thee in the Wood Perilous before yesterday was a day. Now when Ralph heard those last words, such strong and sweet hope and desire stirred in him to see that woman of the want-ways of the Wood Perilous, that he forgot all else, except that he must nowise fall to strife with Roger, lest they should sunder, and he should lose the help of him, which he now deemed would bring him to sight of her, whom he had unwittingly come to long for more than aught else. So he spake to Roger quietly and humbly, Well, faring fellow, thou seest how I am little more than a lad, and have fallen into matters mighty and perilous, which I may not deal with of my own strength, at least until I get nigher to them, so that I may look them in the eyes, and strike a stroke or 2 on them if they be at enmity with me. So I bid thee lead me whither thou wilt, and if thou be a traitor to me, on thine own head be it. In good sooth, since I know not of this wood, and since I might go astray and so come back to the Burg where be those whom thou hast now made my foemen, I am content to take thee on thy word, and to hope the best of thee, and ask no question of thee save whitherward. Fair sir, said Roger, away from this place at least, for we are as yet overnigh to the Burg to be safe. But as to elsewhither we may wend, thereof we may speak on the road as we have leisure. Therewith he smote his horse with his heel, and they went forward at a smart trot. For the horses were unwearied, and the wood thereabouts of beech and clear of underwood. And Roger seemed to know his way well, and made no fumbling over it. 4 hours or more gone, the wood thinned, and the beeches failed. And they came to a country still waste of little low hills, stony for the most part, beset with scraggy thorn bushes, and here and there some other berry tree sown by the birds. Then said Roger, Now I deem us well out of the peril of them of the Burg, who, if they follow the chase as far as the sundering of us and the others, will heed our slot nothing, but will follow on that of the company, so we may breathe our horse a little, though their bait will be but small in this rough waste. Therein we are better off than they, for lo, you saddlebags on my nag and meat and drink therein. So they lighted down and let their horses graze what they could while they ate and drank, amidst which Ralph again asked Roger of whither they were going. Said Roger, I shall lead thee to a good harbour and a noble house of a master of mine, wherein thou mayest dwell certain days, if thou hast a mind thereto, not without solace maybe. And this master, said Ralph, is he of the Dry Tree? Said Roger, I scarce know how to answer thee without lying, but this I say, that whether he be or not, this is true. Amongst those men I have friends, and amongst them foes, but fate bindeth me to them for a while. Said Ralph, reddening, Be there any women amongst them? Yea, quoth Roger, smiling a little, doubt not thereof. And that lady of the Dry Tree, quoth Ralph, reddening yet more, but holding up his head, that woman whereof the burgher spoke so bitterly, threatening her with torments and death if they might but lay hold of her, what wilt thou tell me concerning her? But little, said Roger, save this, that thou desirest to see her, and that thou mayest have thy will thereon, if thou wilt be guided by me. Ralph hearkened as if he heeded little of what Roger said, but presently he rose up and walked to and fro in short turns with knit brows, as one pondering a hard matter. He spake not, and Roger seemed to heed him nothing, though in sooth he looked at him askance from time to time, till at last he came and laid down again by Roger. And in a while he spake, I wot not why ye of the Dry Tree want me, or what ye will do with me, and but for one thing, I would even now ride away from thee at all adventure. Roger said, All this ye shall learn later on, and shalt find it but a simple matter. And meanwhile I tell thee again, that all this is for thy gain and thy pleasure. So now ride away if thou wilt. Who hindereth thee? Certes not I. Nay, said Ralph, I will ride with thee to that first fair house, and afterwards we shall see what is to hap. Yea, quoth Roger, then let us horse straight away, so that we may be there, if not before dark night yet, at least before bright morn, for it is yet far away. Chapter 17. Ralph cometh to the house of abundance. Therewithal they got to horse and rode away through that stony land, wherein was no river, but for water many pools in the bottoms, with little brooks running from them. But after a while they came upon a ridge somewhat high, on the further side whereof was a wide valley well grassed and with a few trees, and no habitation of man that they might see. But a wide river ran down the midst of it, and it was now 4 hours after noon. Quoth Roger, The day wears, and we shall be no means reach harbour before dark night, even if we do our best. Art thou well used to the water, lord? Much as a mallard is, said Ralph. Said Roger, That is well, for though there is a ford some mile and a half downstream, for that same reason it is the way whereby men mostly cross the water into the wildwood. And here again we are more likely to meet foes than well-wishers, or at the least there will be question of who we are, and whence and whither, and we may stumble in our answers. Said Ralph, There is no need to tarry, ride we down to the water. So did they, and took the water, which was deep, but not swift. On the further side they clomb up a hill, somewhat steep. At the crown they drew rein to give their horses breath, and Ralph turned in his saddle and looked down into the valley. And as aforesaid, he was clear-sighted and far-sighted. Now he said, Fellow farer, I see the riding of folk down there below, and meseems they be spurring toward the water, and they have weapons. There, dost thou not see the gleam? I will take thy word for it, fair sir, said Roger, and will even spur, since they be the first men whom we have seen since we left the thickets. And therewith he went off at a hand gallop, and Ralph followed him without more ado. They rode up hill and down dale of a grassy downland, till at last they saw a wood before them again, and soon drew rein under the boughs. For now were the horses somewhat wearied. Then said Ralph, Here have we ridden a fair land, and seen neither house nor herd, neither sheepcote nor shepherd. I wonder thereat. Said Roger, Thou wouldst wonder the less, didst thou know the story of it. What story? Said Ralph. Quoth Roger, A story of war and wasting. Yea, said Ralph, yet surely some bold knight or baron hath rights in the land, and might be free to build him a strong house, and gather men to him to guard the shepherds, and husbandmen from burners and lifters. Sooth is that, said Roger, but there are other things in the tale. What things? Said Ralph. Quoth Roger, Ill hap and sorrow, and the hand of fate, and great sorcery. And dastards withal? Said Ralph. Even so, said Roger, yet mingled with valiant men. Overlong is the tale to tell as now, so low as the sun is, so now ride we on with little fear of foemen. For look you, this wood, like the thickets about the Burg of the Four Friths, hath an evil name, and few folk ride it uncompelled. Therefore it is the safer for us, and will I yet say this to thee, that whereas a while agone thou mightest have departed from me with little peril of aught, save the stumbling on some of the riders of the Burg of the Four Friths, departing from me now will be a hard matter to thee. For the saints in heaven only know whitherward thou shouldest come, if thou wert to guide thyself now. This is a rough word, but a true one. So help me God and Saint Michael. What sayest thou? Art thou content, or wilt thou cast words at me again? So it was, for all that had come and gone, Ralph was light-hearted and happy. So he laughed and said, Content were I, even if I were not compelled thereto, for my heart tells me of new things, and marvellous and joyous that I shall see ere long. And thine heart lieth not, said Roger, for amidst of this wood is the house where we shall have guesting tonight, which will be okay to thee, belike the door of life and many marvels, for thence have folk sought ere now to the well at the world's end. Ralph turned to him sharply and said, Many times in these few days I have heard that word. Dost thou know the meaning thereof? For as to me I know it not. Said Roger, Thou mayest well be as wise man as I am thereon. Belike men seek to it for much thriving, and oftenest find it not. Yet have I heard that they be the likeliest with whom all women are in love. Ralph held his peace, but Roger noted that he reddened at the word. Now they got on horseback again, for they had lighted down to breathe their beasts, and they rode on, and never was Roger at fault. Long was the way, and perforce they rested at whiles, so that night fell upon them in the wood. But the moon rose withal. So night being fairly come, they rested a good while, as it would be dawn before moonset. Then they rode on again, till now the summer night grew old and waned, but the wood hid the beginnings of dawn. At last they came out of the close wood suddenly into an open plain. And now, as the twilight of dawn was passing into early day, they saw that wide grassy meadows and tilled fields lay before them, with a little river running through the plain. And amidst the meadows on a green mound was a white castle, strong and well built, though not of the biggest. Roger pointed to it and said, Now we are come home, and cried on his wearied beast, for who his part seemed to see the end of his journey. They splashed through a ford on the river, and came to a gate of the castle as day grew apace. Roger blew a blast on a great horn that hung on the gate, and Ralph, looking round, deemed he had never seen fairer building than in the castle, what he could see of it, and yet it was built from old. They waited no long while before they were answered. But whereas Ralph looked to see armed gatewards peers from the battlements or the shot window, and a porter espying them through a lattice, it happened in no such way. But without more ado, the wicket was opened to them by a tall old woman, gaunt and grey, who greeted them courteously. Roger lighted down, and Ralph did in likewise, and they led their horses through the gate into the court of the castle, the old woman going before them till they came to the hall door, which she opened to them. And taking the reins of their horses, she led them away to the stable, while those twain entered the hall, which was as goodly as might be. Roger led Ralph up to a board on the dais, whereon there was meat and drink enow, and Ralph made his way-leader sit down by him, and they fell to. There was no serving man to wait on them, nor a carle of any kind they did see. The old woman only, coming back from the horses, served them at table. Ever as she went about, she looked long on Ralph, and seemed as if she would have spoken to him, but as often she glanced at Roger and forbore. So when they were well nigh done with their meat, Ralph spake to the carline and said, Belike the lord or the lady of this house are abed, and we shall not see them till the morrow? Ere the carline could speak, Roger broke in and said, There is neither lord nor lady in the castle as now, nor belike will there be tomorrow morning, or rather before noon on this day. So now ye were better to let this dame lead thee to bed, and let the next hours take care of themselves. So be it, said Ralph, who was by this time heartily wearied. Shall we two lie in the same chamber? Nay, said the carline shortly. Lodging for the master and lodging for the man are two different things. Roger laughed and said naught, and Ralph gave him good night, and he followed the carline nothing loth, who led him to a fair chamber over the solar, as if he had been the very master of the castle. And he lay down in a very goodly bed, nor troubled himself as to where Roger lay, nor indeed of aught else. Nor did he dream of burg, or wood, or castle, or man, or woman, but lay like still the image of his father's father on the painted tomb in the choir of St. Lawrence of Upmeads. Chapter 18. Of Ralph in the Castle of Abundance. Broad lay the sun upon the plain amidst the wildwood, when he awoke and sprang out of bed and looked out the window, for the chamber was in the gable of the hall, and there was naught of the castle beyond it. It was but little after noon of a fair June day, for Ralph had slumbered as it behoved a young man. The light wind bore into the chamber the sweet scents of the early summer, the chief of all of them being the savour of the new-cut grass. For about the wide meadows, the carles and queens were at work at the beginning of hay-harvest. And late as it was in the day, more than once blackbird was singing from the bushes of the castle pleasance. Ralph sighed for very pleasure of life before he had yet well remembered where he was or what had befallen of late. But as he stood at the window and gazed over the meadows, and the memory of all came back to him, he sighed once more for a lack of somewhat that came into his heart. And he smiled shamefacedly, though there was no one near, as his thought bade him wonder if amongst the haymaking women yonder there was any as fair as those yellow-clad thrall women of the burg. And as he turned from the window, a new hope made his heart beat, for he deemed that he had been brought to that house that he might meet someone who should change his life and make him a new man. So he did on his raiment, and went his ways down the hall, and looked about for Roger. But he found him not, nor anyone else save the carline, who presently came in from the buttery, and of whom he asked where was Roger. Quoth she, He has been gone these 6 hours, but hath left a word for thee, Lord to-wit, that he beseeches thee to abide him here for 2 days at least, and thereafter thou art free to go if thou wilt. But as for me, and therewith she smiled on him as sweetly as her wrinkled old face might compass, I say to thee, abide beyond these 2 days, if Roger cometh not, and as long as thou art here, I will make thee all the cheer I may. And who knoweth but thou mayest meet worthy adventures here, such have ere now befallen good knights in this house or anigh it. I thank thee, mother, quoth Ralph, and it is like that I may abide here beyond the 2 days, if the adventure befall me not herein. But at least I will bide thy eating of my dinner here today. Well as thee, fair lord, said the carline, if thou wilt but walk in the meadow but a little half-hour, all shall be ready for thee. Forsooth it had been dight before now, but that I waited thy coming forth from thy chamber, for I would not wake thee. And the saints be praised, for the long sweet sleep hath painted thy goodly cheeks. So saying, she hurried off to the buttery, leaving Ralph laughing at her outspoken flattering words. Then he got him out of the hall in the castle, for no door was shut, and there was no man to be seen within or about the house. So he walked to and fro through the meadow, and saw the neat herds in the pasture, and the hay-making folk beyond them, and the sound of their voices came to him on the little airs that were breathing. He thought he would talk to some of these folk, ere the world was much older, and also he noted between the river and the wood many cots of the husbandmen trimly builded and thatched, and amidst them a little church, white and delicate of fashion. But as now his face was set toward the river because of the hot day. He came to a pool a little below where a wooden footbridge crossed the water, and about the pool were willows growing, which had not been shrouded these 8 years, and the water was clear as glass, with a bottom of fine sand. There then he bathed him, and he sported in the water. He bethought him of the long smooth reaches of Upmead's water, and the swimming low down amidst the long swinging weeds between the chuckle of the reed sparrows, when the sun was new risen in the July morning. When he stood on the grass again, what with the bright weather and fair little land, what with the freshness of the water and his good rest, and the hope of adventure to come, he felt as if he had never been merrier in his life days. Withal, it was weight off his heart that he had escaped from the turmoil of the wars of the Burg of the Four Friths, and the men of the Dry Tree, and the wheat-wearers, and the thraldom of stripes and fire-raising, and the hard life of strife and gain of the walled town and strong place. When he came back to the castle gate, there was the carline in the wicket peering out right to left, seeking him to bring him in to his dinner. And when she saw him so joyous, with his lips smiling and his eyes dancing for mirth, she also became joyous, and said, Verily, it is a pity of thee that there is never a fair damsel or so to look on thee, and love thee here today. Far would many a maiden run to kiss thy mouth, fair lad. But now come to thy meat, that thou mayest grow the fairer and last the longer. He laughed gaily and went into the hall with her, and now was it well dight with bankers and dorsers, of goodly figured cloth, and on the walls a goodly halling of arras of the story of Alexander. So he sat to table, and the meat and drink was of the best, and the carline served him, praising him ever with fulsome words as he ate, till he wished her away. After dinner he rested a while, and called to the carline, and bade her bring him his sword and his basnet. Wherefore, said she, whither wilt thou? Said he, I would walk abroad to drink the air. Wilt thou into the wildwood? Said she. Nay, mother, he said, I will but walk about the meadow, and look on the haymaking folk. For that, said the carline, thou needest neither sword nor helm. I was afeard that thou wert departing, and thy departure would be a grief to my heart. In the deep wood thou mightest be so bestead as to need a sword in thy fist. But what shouldest thou do with it in this plain of abundance, where are not but peaceful husbandmen and frank and kind maidens? And all these are as if they had drunk a draught of the well at the world's end. Ralph started as she said the word, but held his peace a while. Then he said, And who is lord of this fair land? There is no lord, but a lady, said the carline. How might she? Said Ralph. We call her the Lady of Abundance, said the old woman. Said Ralph, Is she a good lady? She is my lady, said the carline, and doeth good to me, and there is not a carle in the land but speaketh well of her. It may be over well. Is she fair to look on? Said Ralph. Of women folk there is none fairer, said the carline. As to men, that is another thing. Ralph was silent a while, then he said, What is the well at the world's end? They talk of it here, said she, many things too long to tell of now, but there is a book in this house that telleth of it. I know it well by the look of it, though I may not read in it. I will seek it for thee tomorrow if thou wilt. Have thou thanks, dame, said he, and I pray thee forget it not, but now I will go forth. Yea, said the carline, but abide a little. Therewith she went into the buttery, and came back bearing with her a garland of roses of the garden, intermingled with green leaves. And she said, The sun is yet hot and over-hot. Do this on thine head to shade thee from the burning. I knew that thou wouldest go abroad today, so I made this for thee in the morning. When I was young, I was called the garland maker, that it is better summer wear than thy basnet. He thanked her, and did it on smiling, but somewhat ruefully, for he said to himself, This is over old a dame that I should wear a love token from her. But when it was on his head, the old dame clapped her hands and cried, Oh, there, there, now art thou like the image of St. Michael in the choir of Our Lady of the Thorn. There is none so lovely as thou. I would my lady could see it thus. Surely the sight of thee should gladden her heart, and withal thou art not ill-clad otherwise. Indeed, his raiment was goodly, for his surcoat was new, and it was of a fine green cloth. And the coat-armour of Upmead was beaten on it, to wit, on a gold ground an apple tree fruited, standing by a riverside. Now he laughed somewhat uneasily at her words, and so went forth from the castle again. He made straight for the haymaking folk on the other side of the water, for all this side was being fed by beasts and sheep. But at the point where he crossed, the winding of the stream brought it near to the castle gate. So he came up with the country folk and greeted them, and they did as much by him in courteous words. They were goodly and well shapen, both men and women, gay and joyous of demeanor, and well clad as for folk who work afield. So Ralph went from one to another and gave them a word or two, and was well pleased to watch them at their work a while. But yet he would fain speak somewhat more with one or other of them. At last, under the shade of a tall elm tree, he saw an old man sitting heating the outer raiment of the haymakers, and their victual and bottles of drink, and he came up to him and gave him the seelie of the day, and the old man blessed him and said, "Art thou dwelling in my lady's castle, fair lord?" "A while at least," said Ralph. Said the old man, "We thank thee for coming to see us, and meseemeth from the look of thee thou art worthy to dwell in my lady's house." "What sayest thou?" said Ralph. "Is she a good lady and gracious?" "Oh, yea, yea," said the carle. Said Ralph, "Thou meanest, I suppose, that she is fair to look on, and soft-spoken when she is pleased?" "I mean far more than that," said the carle. "Surely is she most heavenly fair, and her voice is like the music of heaven. But withal her deeds and the kindness of her to us poor men and husbandmen are no worse than should flow forth from that loveliness." "Will you be her servants?" said Ralph. "Or what are ye?" Said the carle, "We be yeomen and her vavasors. There is no thraldom in our land." "Do ye live in good peace for the most part?" said Ralph. Said the carle, "Time has been when cruel battles were fought in these woodlawns, and many poor people were destroyed therein. But that was before the coming of the Lady of Abundance." "And when was that?" said Ralph. "I wot not," said the old carle. "I was born in peace, and suckled in peace. In peace I fell to the loving of maidens, and I wedded in peace, and begat children in peace, and in peace they dwell about me, and in peace shall I depart." "What then," said Ralph, and a grievous fear was born in his heart, "is not the Lady of Abundance young?" Said the carle, "I have seen her when I was young, and also since I have been old, and ever was she fair and lovely, and slender-handed, as straight as a spear, and as sweet as white clover, and gentle-voiced and kind, and dear to our souls." "Yea," said Ralph, "and she doth not dwell in the castle always. Where else then doth she dwell?" "I wot not," said the carle, "but it should be in heaven, for when she cometh to us, all our joys increase in us by the half." "Look you, father," said Ralph, "may it not have been more than one Lady of Abundance that thou hast seen in thy life days? And that this one that now is the daughter's daughter of the one whom thou first sawest. How sayest thou?" The carle laughed. "Nay, nay," said he, "it is not so. Never has there been another like to her in all the ways, in body and voice, and heart and soul. It is as I say, she is the same as she was always." "And when," said Ralph with a beating heart, "does she come hither? Is it at some set season?" "Nay, from time to time at all seasons," said the carle. "And as fair she is when she goeth over the snow, as when her feet are set amidst the June daisies." Now was Ralph so full of wonder that he scarce knew what to say, but he bethought him that fair waste on the other side of the forest, the country through which the wide river flowed. So he said, "In that land north away beyond the wildwood, canst thou tell me the tale of its wars, and if it were wasted in the same wars that tormented this land?" The carle shook his head. "As to the land beyond this wood," quoth he, "I know not of it, for beyond the wood go we never. Nay, most often we go but a little way into it, no further than we can see the glimmer of the open daylight through its trees, the daylight of the land of abundance. That is enough for us." "Well," said Ralph, "I thank thee for thy tale that thou hast told me, and I wish thee more years of peace." "And to thee, young man," said the carle, "I wish a good wish indeed, to wit that thou mayest see the Lady of Abundance here before thou departest." His words once more made Ralph's heart beat and his cheek flush, and he went back to the castle somewhat speedily, for he said to himself after the folly of lovers, Maybe she will come even now, and I not there to meet her. Yet when he came to the castle gate, his heart misgave him, and he would not enter at once, but turned about to go round the wall by the north and west. In the castle he saw no soul saving the old dame looking out the window and nodding to him. But in the pasture all about were neat-herds and shepherds, both men and women. And at the northwest corner, whereas the river drew quite close to the wall, he came upon two damsels of the field folk fishing with an angle in a quiet pool of the stream. He greeted them, and they, who were young and goodly, returned his greeting. But they were shamefaced at his gallant presence, as indeed was he at the thoughts of his heart mingled with the sight of their fairness. So he passed on at first without more words than his greeting. Yet presently he turned back again, for he longed to hear some word more concerning the lady whose coming he abode. They stood smiling and blushing as he came up to them again, and heeded their angles little. Said Ralph, "Fair maidens, do you know at all when the lady of the castle may be looked for?" They were slow to answer, but at last one said, "No, fair sir, such as we know nothing of the comings and goings of great folk." Said Ralph, smiling on her for kindness and pleasure of her fairness, "Is it not so that ye will be glad of her coming?" But she answered never a word, only looked at him steadily with her great grey eyes fixed in wonderment, while the other one looked down as if intent on her angling tools. Ralph knew not how to ask another question, so he turned about with a greeting word again, and this time went on steadily round about the wall. And now in his heart waxed the desire of that lady, once seen, as he deemed, in such strange wise. But he wondered within himself if the devil had not sown that longing within him. Whereas it might be that this woman, on whom he had set his heart, was herself no real woman, but a devil, and one of the goddesses of the ancient world. And his heart was sore and troubled by many doubts and hopes and fears. But he said to himself that when he saw her, then could he judge between the good and the evil, and could do or forbear, at that sight of her would cure all. Thus thinking, he walked swiftly, and was soon round at the castle gate again. He entered and went into the hall, where was the old dame busied about some household matter. Ralph nodded to her and hastened away, lest she should fall to talk with him, and he set himself now to go from chamber to chamber, that he might learn the castle what it was. He came into the guard chamber, and found the walls thereof all hung with armor and weapons, cleaned and in good order, though there was never a man at arms there, nor any soul except the old woman. He went up a stair therefrom on the battlements, and went into the towers of the wall. He found weapons both for hand and for cast, and shot in each one of them, and as all ready as if for present battle. Then he came down into the court again, and went into a very goodly ambulatory over against the hall, and he entered a door therefrom, which was but on the latch, and went up a little stair into a chamber, which was the goodliest and the richest of all. Its roof was all done with gold and blue from oversea, and its pavement wrought delicately in Alexandrine work. On the dais was a throne of carven ivory, and above it a canopy of baudekyn of the goodliest fashion, and there was a foot carpet before it, wrought with beasts and the hunting of deer. As for the walls of that chamber, they were hung with a marvellous hailing of arras, wherein was wrought the greenwood. And there, amidst one place, was a pot-herb garden, and a green garth with goats therein, and in that garth a little thatched house. And amidst all this greenery were figured over and over again two women, whereof one old and the other young. And the old one was clad in grand attire, with gold chains and brooches and rings, and sat with her hands before her by the house door, or stood looking on as if the young one worked, spinning or digging in the garth, or milking the goats outside of it, and what not, and this one was clad in sorry and scanty raiment. What all this might mean Ralph knew not, but when he had looked long at the greenery and its images, he said to himself that if he who wrought that cloth had not done the young woman after the likeness of the lady whom he had helped in the wildwood, then it must have been done from her twin sister. Long he abode in that chamber, looking at the arras and wondering whether the sitter in that ivory throne would be any other than the thrall in the greenwood cot. He abode there so long that the dusk began to gather in the house, and he could see the images no more, for he was filled with the sweetness of desire when he looked on them. Then he went back slowly to the hall and found the carline who had lighted the wax lights and made meat ready for him. And when she saw him, she cried out joyously, "Ah, I knew that thou wouldest come back. Art thou well content with our little land?" "I like it well, dame," said he. "But tell me, if thou canst, what is the meaning of the halling and the chamber with the ivory throne?" Said the carline, "Thereof shall another tell thee, who can tell of it better than I. But it is not to hide that yonder chamber is the chamber of estate of Our Lady, and she sitteth there to hear the cases of folk, and to give dooms." The old woman crossed herself as she spoke, and Ralph wondered thereat, but he asked no more questions, for he was scarce sorry that the carline would not tell him thereof, lest she should spoil the tale. So passed the evening, and he went up to bed and slept as a young man should. And the next day he was up betimes, and went abroad and mingled with the carles and queens afield. But this time he spake not of the lady, and heard not to heed from any of that folk. So he went back to the castle, and gat him a bow and arrows, and entered the thicket of the wood nigh where he and Roger first came out of it. He had prayed a young man of the folk to go with him, but he was not over willing to go, though he would not say wherefore. So Ralph went himself by himself, and wandered some way into the wood, and saw not worse than himself. As he came back, making a circuit toward the open meadows, he happened on a herd of deer in a lonely place, half wood, half meadow. And there he slew a hart with one shaft, for he was a deft bowman. Then he went and fetched a leash of carles, who went with him somewhat less than half willingly, and between them they broke up the hart and carried him home to the castle, where the carline met them. She smiled on Ralph and praised the venison, and said withal that the hunting was well done. "For as fond and as fair as thou mayest be, it is not good that young men should have their minds set on one thing only." Therewith she led him on to his meat, and sat him down and served him. And all the while of his dinner he was longing to ask her if she deemed that the lady would come that day, since it was the last day of those which Roger had bidden him wait, but the words would not come out of his mouth. She looked at him and smiled, as though she had a guess of his thought, and at last she said to him, "Thy tongue is tied today. Hast thou after all seen something strange in the wood?" He shook his head for naysay. Said she, "Why then dost thou not ask more concerning the well at the world's end?" He laughed and said, "Maybe because I think that thou canst not tell me thereof." "Well," she said, "if I cannot, yet the book may. And this evening, when the sun is down, thou shalt have it." "I thank thee, mother," said he, "but this is now the last day that Roger bade me wait. Dost thou think that he will come back tonight?" And he reddened therewith. "Nay," she said, "I know not, and thou carest not whether he will come or not. Yet I know that thou wilt abide here till someone else come, whether that be early or late." Again he reddened and said, in a coaxing way, "And wilt thou give me guesting, mother, for a few summer days?" "Yea," she said, "until summer is over, if need be, and the corn is cut and carried, until the winter is come, and the latter end of winter is gone." He smiled faintly, though his heart fell, and he said, "Nay, mother, and can it by any chance be so long a coming?" "O fair boy," she said, "thou wilt make it long, howsoever short it be. And now I will give thee rede, lest thou vex thyself sick and fret thy very heart. Tomorrow go see if thou canst meet thy fate instead of abiding it. Do on thy war gear, and take thy sword and try the adventure of the wildwood, but go not over deep into it." Said she, "But how if the lady come while I am away from this house?" "Sooth to say," said the carline, "I deem not that she will, for the way is long betwixt us and her." "Dost thou mean," said Ralph, standing up from the board, "that she will not come ever? I adjure thee not to beguile me with soft words, but tell me the very sooth." "There, there," said she, "sit down, king's son, eat thy meat and drink thy wine, for tomorrow is a new day. She will come soon or late, if she be yet in the world. And now I will say no more to thee concerning this matter." Therewith she went her ways from the hall, and when she came back with a hand basin and towel, she said no word to him, but only smiled kindly. He went out presently into the meadow, for it was yet but early afternoon, and came among the haymaking folk, and spake with them, hoping that perchance some of them might speak again of the Lady of Abundance. But none of them did so, though the old carle he had spoken with was there, and there was also with 2 maidens whom he had seen fishing. And as for him, he was over faint-hearted to ask them any more questions concerning her. Yet he abode with them long, and ate and drank amidst the hay with them till the moon shone brightly. Then he went back to the castle and found the carline in the hall. She had the book with her, and gave it to him, and he sat down in the shot window under the wax lights, and fell to reading of it. Chapter 19. Ralph readeth in a book concerning the well at the world's end. Fairly written was that book, with many pictures therein, the meaning of which Ralph knew not. But amongst them was the image of the fair woman whom he had holpen at the wantways of the wood, and but 4 days ago was yet it seemed long and long to him. The book told not much about the well at the world's end, but much it told of a certain woman whom no man that saw her could forbear to love. Of her it told that erewhile she dwelt lonely in the wildwood, though how she came there that was not said, and how a king's son found her there, and brought her to his father's kingdom, and wedded her, whether others were lief or loath. And in a little while, when the fame of her had spread, he was put out of his kingdom, and his father's house for the love of her, because other kings and lords hankered after her, whereof befell long and grievous wars, which she abode not to the end, but sought to her old place in the wildwood. And how she found there another woman, a sorceress, who made her thrall, and tormented her grievously with toil and stripes. And how again there came a knight to that place who was seeking the well at the world's end, and bore her away with him, and how the said knight was slain on the way, and she was taken by tyrants and robbers of the folk. But these being entangled in her love, fought amongst themselves, and she escaped, and went seeking that well, and found it at the long last, and drank thereof, and throve ever after. And how she liveth yet, and is become the servant of the well, to entangle the seekers in her love, and keep them from drinking thereof, because there was no man that beheld her, but anon he was the thrall of her love, and might not pluck his heart away from her to do any of the deeds whereby men thrive and win the praise of the people. Ralph read on and on till the short night waned, and the wax lights failed one after the other, and the windows of the hall grew grey, and daylight came. Then the throstles burst out a-singing at once in the castle pleasaunce, and the sun came up over the wood, and the sound of men-folk bestirring themselves afield came to his ears through the open windows. And at last he was done with the tale, and the carline came not near him, though the sun had clomb high up in the heavens. As for Ralph, what he had read was sweet poison to him, for it before he was somewhat tormented by love, now was his heart sick and sore with it. Though he knew not for certain whether this tale had to do with the Lady of the Forest, and though he knew not if the lady who should come to the castle were even she, yet he needs must deem that so it was, and his heart was weary with love, and his manhood seemed changed. This is the end of chapters 16 through 19 of The Well at the World's End, a tale by William Morris. Thank you for listening.